Readers of multiple varieties are available on state testing. Each individual test will have literature that guides you on how each reader is to be provided within the testing environment. Text-to-speech is allowed for students with an IEP 504 or PSP. A reader can read everything from cover to cover in the assessment to the student. If the student requests to read parts independently, that is allowed and the proctor must stop reading. All students have the right to grade instruction, so giving an accommodation does not relieve the teacher, school, or district of the responsibility of giving the student top-notch instruction. Some other highlights. A reader must always watch inflections and emphatic speech when reading. This is of particular concern for human readers. The job of a reader is never to lead a student to an answer. There must be documentation over time that with intervention and high-quality instruction, the student is still unable to access the reading assessment. The goal of any accommodation should be to phase it out over time and grow a student to be independent. Now let's dive deeper into what a reader may do. Keep in mind these rules apply to any reader in any testing environment. A reader must read the directions, prompts, situations, and passages as they're written in the test. A reader may not use or provide any additional information, even if requested by the student. A reader may reread any part of the test to the student only after the student requests it for students taking the general assessment. If a student is taking the alternate assessment, those are currently scripted assessments. Test administrators may determine when a student is not focused and may reread at any time. A reader may not point out parts of questions or tasks skipped by the student. A reader may read individual words or abbreviations mispronounced by a screen reader, if specifically requested by the student. A reader may not lead a student to an answer. Remember, no emphatic speech when reading. These rules apply to any state test given in any format, and whether the student is taking the test online or paper and pencil. Now let's look at some ways to prevent allegations or best practices to engage in when providing a reader. Number 1, a reader should never guide or direct a student to a correct response. When reading to a student, the test administrator should never change the test item or answer options even at the student's request. A reread may be provided only at the request of a student. The only time the test administrator is permitted to reread something without a student request is for the alternate assessment. Now let's discuss what a scribe may do. Keep in mind, these rules apply to any scribe in any testing environment. A student cannot be given a scribe just because his or her handwriting is poor or because they write slowly. There must be documentation of the disability's impact on the student's writing, showing he or she is performing significantly and consistently below same-age peers. A scribe merely writes what the student says. The student must remain the sole creator and editor at all times. A district has discretion of who can serve as a scribe, but peer tutors are not allowed. Any person not working in a certified position who is providing assistance shall read and sign a non-disclosure agreement provided by the department. A scribe cannot be used as a replacement for writing instruction or assistive technology. For an EL student with a PSP, a scribe shall be provided if the student has not reached proficiency on the annual English language proficiency assessment. A scribe must, regardless of testing format, record word for word what the student says, written onto paper or typed into the online platform. Format, capitalize, and punctuate as directed by the student. Give this written or typed product to the student to edit or revise. Not alter, edit, or revise a student's own ideas, revisions, or edits. These rules never change, whether a test is given online or paper and pencil. Now let's look at some ways to prevent allegations or some best practices to engage in when providing scribe accommodation. A scribe should only record the exact information a student provides. All answers must be directed and guided by the student at all times. A scribe should only provide the writing support to a student unless they have additional accommodations permitted on the test. For example, the scribe cannot read a response back to the student unless that student also has a reader on their plan. Check for understanding number 6. Question 1. Which of the following is not a role of the reader? A. Reading a test book cover to cover. B. Pointing out parts of questions or tasks skipped by the student. C. Reread any part of the test if the student requests it. D. Read individual words or abbreviations the text or audio reader mispronounces. The answer is B. As a reader, you are not allowed to point out mistakes or errors the student has previously or is actively making. Your only allowed job is to read the test booklet for the student. Question 2. If a student does not understand a word or phrase in the passage or a question, is it okay to summarize or explain that text to the student in language they understand? A. Yes, if the student asks for you to explain it. B. Always yes. C. Yes, if they have a reader. D. No. Paraphrasing is not an acceptable accommodation. The answer is D. Paraphrasing is not an acceptable accommodation. It is never okay to summarize or explain anything within the assessment portion of a testing book to a student. Question 3. A student is provided with a reader accommodation in their IEP. The test administrator is reading the test. The student requests the reader to reread the passage and define a word that is not understood. Is this allowed? A. Yes to both. The student has a reader and paraphrasing and rereads are allowed. B. No to both. Rereads are not allowed. C. Yes to the reread. The reread is allowed, but paraphrasing test content is never allowed. D. No to the reread. Rereads are not allowed, but the paraphrasing is okay. The answer is C. The student is allowed to request a reread, and that may be fulfilled. However, test content, even with a paraphrasing accommodation, may not be defined, summarized, or changed under any circumstances. Question 4. Who cannot serve as a scribe, even if they have received the inclusion of special populations training? A. Special ed teacher. B. Peer tutor. C. Substitute teacher. D. Counselor. The answer is B. The regulation specifically bars peer tutors from being a scribe. Question 5. Which of the following must a scribe do to ensure they prevent an allegation? A. Record only the exact information a student provides in the answer box. B. Reread the answer the student provided and require the student to provide all edits to the answer. C. Never read the answer back to the student under any circumstances. D. Correct all mistakes within the written answer for the student. The answer is A. As a scribe, your only job is to record the exact information provided to you by the student within the answer box of the test. The student must direct or provide any edits. And remember, you cannot read it back unless they also have the reader accommodation.